What if immortality, the one thing humanity has chased across every myth, every legend, every era of belief, was never a gift at all, but a sentence that simply has no ending? Not a punishment in the traditional sense, not something imposed in anger or vengeance, but something far more unsettling, a state of existence where time continues, but meaning slowly dissolves. Because when we imagine immortality, we often imagine power, freedom, and transcendence, yet mythology repeatedly suggests something very different, that to exist forever is not to conquer time, but to be trapped inside it. In Greek mythology, immortality is rarely presented as a blessing for those who were not meant to possess it. It does not elevate them into gods. Instead, it isolates them from everything that gives life its structure. And nowhere is this more painfully clear than in the story of Tithonus, a figure whose fate quietly dismantles the illusion of eternal life. Loved by a goddess, he was granted immortality, a wish that at first seems like the ultimate transcendence of human limitation. Yet something crucial was forgotten: youth. And as time moved forward, his body did not stop changing. It aged, it weakened, it decayed, but it never ended. What begins as a gift slowly becomes distortion as existence stretches beyond the limits it was meant to hold. Tithonus does not die. He diminishes. He becomes something that continues, but no longer truly lives, trapped in a form that time refuses to release. His story does not rely on violence or spectacle, yet it reveals something far more disturbing: that immortality without renewal is not preservation, but erosion. A different form of this eternal condition appears in the figure of Prometheus, whose immortality ensures that his suffering never reaches conclusion. Bound to a rock, his body is torn apart each day, only to regenerate each night, resetting the cycle without altering its outcome. This is not simply pain extended over time. It is pain that is designed to repeat without progress, without adaptation, without escape. What makes this punishment particularly significant is not its intensity, but its structure. It removes the possibility of change. The body heals, but only to suffer again. The cycle continues, not because it must, but because it is made to. In this sense, immortality becomes the mechanism that allows suffering to exist indefinitely, transforming what could have been a finite consequence into an eternal condition. When these two figures are considered together, a deeper pattern begins to emerge. Tithonus represents a body that cannot escape time, while Prometheus represents a body that cannot escape repetition. One erodes endlessly, the other endures endlessly. And within both lies the same underlying principle. Immortality removes the boundary that gives experience its meaning. Without an ending, there is no resolution. Without resolution, there is no transformation. And without transformation, existence becomes static, locked in a state that cannot evolve. This stands in direct contrast to how humans perceive life. Mortality imposes limits, but those limits create urgency. They give weight to decisions, value to moments, and structure to experience. Every beginning carries significance because it will eventually end. Every connection matters because it cannot last forever. But remove that limit, and something fundamental begins to shift. Time no longer frames experience, it dilutes it. Moments lose distinction. Change loses direction. And gradually, what once felt meaningful becomes indistinguishable from everything else. This is perhaps why immortality in mythology is so often reserved for gods, not because it is inherently desirable, but because it requires a different kind of existence to sustain it. The gods do not age, they do not deteriorate, and they are not bound by the same physical or emotional constraints as mortals. Their immortality is not an extension of human life. It is a different category entirely. When mortals attempt to cross into that category, the result is not transcendence, but imbalance. What makes this idea even more unsettling is that immortality does not always manifest as suffering in the obvious sense. It can also appear as permanence without growth, as existence without progression. To live forever does not guarantee fulfillment. It only guarantees continuation. And continuation, when detached from purpose, becomes something difficult to distinguish from emptiness. Because if there is always more time, then nothing is urgent. And if nothing is urgent, then nothing is truly necessary. This leads to a question that mythology never answers directly, but continuously circles around. Is the value of life derived from what it contains, or from the fact that it ends? If life had no boundary, would it still carry meaning, or would it slowly lose it over time? The stories of Tithonus and Prometheus do not provide solutions, but they do offer a perspective, one in which immortality is not framed as liberation, but as a condition that exposes the fragility of meaning itself. And perhaps this is why humanity continues to pursue the idea of eternal life, despite the warnings embedded in its oldest stories. Because from the outside, immortality appears as freedom, but from within, it may feel very different. Not as an endless expansion of possibility, but as an endless repetition of existence, where time continues long after meaning has faded.